Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a mystery that blends the eerie charm of the old with the pulse of the modern world. Get ready to explore stories that whisper secrets of the past and ignite your imagination in the most unexpected ways. Let's get started. Beneath the sickly glow of neon signs and the steady patter of rain against pavement, Elena Morrow stepped off the bus and into a city that hummed with a secret life of its own. Eastbourne was a sprawling mosaic of crumbling brick and modern steel, a place where old legends entwined with the pulse of contemporary existence. As she walked toward the narrow, unassuming street where her new apartment awaited, an inexplicable chill crept up her spine, a premonition that something far more intricate than the usual urban solitude was about to unfold. The building, an austere structure of gray stone and weathered wood, loomed like a sentinel against the dark sky. Its facade bore scars of time and whispered of lives once lived with passion and despair. The foyer, dimly lit by flickering amber bulbs, exuded an air of abandonment and sorrow. Even before crossing its threshold, Elena felt the palpable weight of unseen eyes, watching her with silent expectation. Inside, the corridors were labyrinthine, a tangle of narrow passageways that seemed to shift subtly with every step. Elena's footsteps echoed off the walls, merging with the distant murmur of voices that she couldn't quite place. It wasn't long before she encountered her landlord, Mr. Carver, a gaunt man whose eyes held both kindness and melancholy. "Welcome, Ms. Morrow," he said in a voice as fragile as the ancient plaster that lined the halls. "I trust you'll find solace here, though this place has its own ideas about comfort." His words, delivered with a gentle chuckle, left an impression that would resonate in the days to come. As the days melded into nights, Elena settled into her modest apartment on the third floor, a space that, despite its sparse furnishings, thrummed with the potential for stories untold. Her evenings were spent at her small desk, typing away at her latest assignment, while the building around her seemed to breathe with the secrets of its past. Sometimes, as she worked, she would catch a glimpse of movement in the periphery of her vision, a shadow slipping across the wall, or the faintest echo of a whispered conversation. At first, she dismissed these as tricks of the light, or the product of her overactive imagination. Yet, as time wore on, the inexplicable occurrences became impossible to ignore. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind howled like a chorus of forlorn spirits, Elena heard a persistent knocking at her door. The sound was irregular, punctuated by long pauses that left her heart pounding in her chest. She hesitated before opening it, half expecting to confront an unwelcome intruder. Instead, she found only a small, leather-bound journal resting on her doorstep, its cover embossed with a symbol she didn't recognize, a labyrinth interwoven with a crescent moon. Trembling, she brought the journal inside, its pages yellowed and filled with neat, looping handwriting that chronicled the thoughts and confessions of someone long gone. Curiosity mingled with a growing sense of foreboding as Elena delved into the journal. Each entry recounted moments of intense loneliness, of conversations with a presence that lurked in the corners of the apartment, and whispered in languages lost to time. One entry, dated decades ago, described the unseen architect of the building, a spectral force believed to have shaped its very foundations in a quest for eternal remembrance. As Elena read, the hairs on her arms stood on end. The journal's author had spoken of nightly visitations, of doors that creaked open by themselves and of mirrors that reflected not only the living but also a pale, sorrowful countenance behind them. That night sleep eluded her as she lay awake, haunted by images of the journal's cryptic passages. In the dead silence, interrupted only by the steady hum of the city beyond her window, she thought she heard the soft scratch of a pen on paper coming from the darkened corner of her room. "Is someone there?" she whispered into the void. Her voice trembled, betraying a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to feel. For a moment, the silence answered back, heavy and oppressive, before the sound of a distant sigh drifted toward her, a sigh laden with regret and longing. Over the following weeks, the line between dream and reality blurred. Elena began to notice that objects in her apartment subtly rearranged themselves. A vase would be shifted ever so slightly from its place, and curtains, drawn one moment, would hang differently by the next. One evening, While cooking dinner, she caught sight of a reflection in the window, a faint silhouette standing behind her, its eyes glistening with unshed tears. When she spun around, nothing was there except the cold, indifferent air. The phenomenon became more frequent, and the once peaceful space turned into a stage for eerie, unspoken performances. Desperate for answers, Elena sought out Mr. Carver once more. In his cluttered office, amid relics of the building's storied past, he recounted a tale that was as disquieting as it was inexplicable. This building, he confided, his voice barely above a whisper, was constructed on a foundation of lost dreams and broken promises. The original architect was rumored to have been touched by forces beyond our world, a man who etched the secrets of existence into stone. Over time, those secrets seeped into the walls, infecting every corner with memories too potent to fade. His eyes met hers with an intensity that made her shiver. Many who dwell here feel the weight of those memories, as if the building itself is alive and yearning to share its truth. Armed with a mixture of skepticism and a desperate need to understand, Elena began investigating the building's history. Late nights at the local library yielded dusty records and faded photographs of former tenants, many of whom had vanished without explanation. In one particularly chilling account, she discovered that a young couple had once been torn apart by an inexplicable force, one who, it seemed, haunted the corridors of their shared life even after death. The more she learned, the more the building's malignant spirit began to manifest. Whispers echoed down empty halls, and spectral figures appeared at the periphery of her vision, as if trying to communicate in a language that defied mortal comprehension. One particularly stormy night, when the wind battered the ancient window panes and rain drummed a relentless tattoo against the glass, Elena resolved to confront the force head-on. "I'm tired of living in fear," she declared aloud, her voice firm yet laced with trepidation. "I will unearth your secrets, whatever they may be." She carried the journal with her as if it were a talisman, venturing into the building's long-forgotten corridors. With only a dim lantern in hand, she navigated narrow passageways that seemed to spiral into an abyss. Each step was accompanied by a cacophony of creaks and groans from the ancient structure, as if the building itself were protesting her intrusion. In a remote wing of the building, shrouded in perpetual darkness, she came upon a room that felt utterly detached from time. Dust motes danced in the beam of her lantern as she discovered an array of antique mirrors leaning against walls that bore indecipherable symbols. As she approached one mirror, its surface rippled like a disturbed pond, and she caught sight of her own reflection morphing into something else, a visage of sorrow and despair that wasn't entirely her own. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling with both fear and an inexplicable kinship. For a moment, the mirror seemed to smile back, a fleeting glimpse of something both tender and tragic, before the image dissolved into a swirling mist. Her internal reflections were as chaotic as the supernatural events around her. At times, Elena questioned her sanity, wondering if the isolation and relentless darkness had conspired to weave phantasms from the recesses of her mind. Yet, every time doubt crept in, the journal and the murmuring voices reinforced the reality of her experiences. In quiet moments, she would scribble frantic notes, trying to capture the ephemeral details before they slipped away like sand through her fingers. "I must remember every detail," she wrote, her handwriting a mirror of her mounting urgency. "For in these fragments of memory lie the key to understanding the inexplicable." Dialogue with unseen entities became a surreal routine. One evening, as a gentle knock reverberated through the walls, Elena addressed the disembodied presence. "What is it that you want from me?" she asked, her tone a blend of defiance and pleading. The response was a chorus of voices, fragmented whispers that mingled with the rustle of old paper and the hum of distant machinery. They spoke of regret, of a lost love that transcended mortal boundaries, and of a curse that bound them to the building's very essence. In that moment, Elena felt a profound sorrow, as though she were witnessing the remnants of 1,000 broken hearts striving for redemption. The culmination of her quest came unexpectedly on an evening when the city was shrouded in an eerie mist. The usual clamor of traffic and the hum of urban life were replaced by a silence that felt pregnant with anticipation. Elena returned to her apartment to find the journal open on her desk, its pages now bearing a new entry in the same precise handwriting that had once recounted despair. The message was cryptic. In the shadows of memory, we are all entwined. Seek the heart of the labyrinth, and the truth shall be unveiled. The words resonated deep within her, stirring something dormant and profound. Driven by a newfound resolve, she retraced her steps to that forgotten wing of the building. With each step, the spectral presence grew stronger, until the corridor itself seemed to pulse with a life of its own. In the heart of that wing, behind a heavy wooden door etched with the same crescent motif as the journal, she discovered a small, hidden chamber. Inside, remnants of the past were meticulously preserved, a collection of photographs, love letters, and a shattered music box that played a melancholy tune when its key was turned. The artifacts painted a portrait of a romance doomed by fate, a love story that had defied time only to be consumed by an insatiable darkness. As the final notes of the music box faded into silence, the chamber was filled with an overwhelming presence. The air grew frigid, and a soft, sorrowful voice seemed to emanate from the very walls. "We are the echoes of those who once dared to love," it intoned, each word imbued with both hope and despair. In that moment, Elena realized that the building was not merely a relic of a bygone era but a repository of human longing, a vessel for souls who had been forgotten by time. The spectral architect, the unseen curator of these memories, had not been malevolent but burdened with the eternal task of preserving the echoes of lost lives. In the days that followed, the intensity of the supernatural occurrences gradually waned, leaving behind a lingering sense of melancholy and introspection. Elena, forever changed by her encounters, resolved to document the experiences in a series of essays that blurred the line between reality and the paranormal. She spoke of the building as a living memoir, a testament to love, loss, and the ceaseless passage of time. "It is in the quiet spaces between our heartbeats," she wrote in one of her final entries, "that the true essence of our existence is revealed. And in those moments, even the dead whisper their truths." The city of Eastbourne continued its restless rhythm, indifferent to the extraordinary events that had unfolded within its walls. Yet, for those who passed by the old building on the narrow street, there remained an unspoken understanding, a subtle acknowledgement that some places are forever intertwined with the fabric of memory and mystery. And on moonlit nights, when the rain fell softly and shadows danced in a spectral ballet, one might still hear the gentle murmur of voices, echoing the timeless story of a love that defied death, and the haunting beauty of a life lived in the margins of what is known. As Elena Morrow's essays found their way into the hands of curious readers, the building itself stood as an enduring enigma. A silent witness to the interplay of light and darkness, of hope and despair. Its corridors, once filled with apprehension and uncertainty, now resonated with the quiet dignity of remembrance. And in the soft whisper of the wind, as it swept through the empty halls, there lingered a promise that every soul, no matter how fleeting, leaves an indelible mark on the tapestry of time, and that even in the deepest shadows, the light of forgotten dreams continues to flicker, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. In this continuous dance between the tangible and the spectral, Elena learned that some mysteries are meant not to be unraveled completely, but rather to be embraced as part of the complex, bittersweet symphony of existence. And so, with each new sunrise casting delicate hues upon the city, the haunted building remained a timeless monument to the fragile, ephemeral nature of life. A reminder that in the quiet depths of night, when all is still, the echoes of the past are never truly gone, but live on in the hearts of those willing to listen. Shadows of the neon abyss. A persistent drizzle fell over the city as Alexis stepped off the bus, clutching her single suitcase like a talisman. The neon glow of downtown reflected off wet pavement, turning every puddle into a fleeting mirror of distorted light. Tonight, she wasn't just beginning a new job, she was beginning a new life in an old building with secrets buried in its concrete bones. Neon Ascend, the apartment building where Alexis had rented a modest one-bedroom, loomed over the street like a relic of another era. Its facade, a patchwork of modern glass panels and faded brickwork, hinted at a history that refused to be forgotten. Rumors had swirled among locals, whispered legends of odd sounds in empty corridors, strange shadows cast by streetlights, and an unshakable feeling that the building was alive in its own mysterious way. Yet, with nothing more than hope and a desperate need for change, Alexis had signed the lease. The first few nights were uneventful aside from the ever-present patter of rain and the creaks of an old structure settling in the cool hours. But as autumn deepened and the wind grew sharper, Alexis began to notice small anomalies. At around 3:17 a.m., a time she would come to mark as the witching hour, the steady hum of the city seemed to die down, replaced by a strange, rhythmic tapping. At first, she assumed it was nothing more than the building's aging pipes or a peculiar quirk of its structure. Yet the pattern was too deliberate: 3 short knocks, a pause, then 3 more. One night, as Alexis lay awake in her narrow bed, the sound intensified. Her heart pounded as she pressed her ear against the cold wall of her living room, straining to catch the faint resonance beneath the tapping. It was as if the building itself was speaking in a code older than memory. Sleep eluded her. Her mind was already racing with questions. Who, or what, was behind those knocks? And why did they come with the same exact timing, night after night? Determined to unravel the mystery, Alexis resolved to document each occurrence. She set up a small recorder on her bedside table and scribbled hurried notes in a journal. The first entry was full of mundane observations: temperature drops, shifts in the air's weight, the dampness of the walls. But as the nights passed, her descriptions grew increasingly vivid and troubled. Tonight the sound was sharper, like it was trying to mimic a heartbeat, she wrote, her hand trembling as she scrawled the words. And when I pressed my ear to the wall, I thought I heard a whisper: "Time is not free." The revelation of that whisper sent shockwaves through her routine. The following day, Alexis sought out the building manager, Mr. Corbett, an elderly man with a perpetually somber expression. In his cluttered office, he hesitated before speaking. "There are things in Neon SN that can't be explained by modern engineering," he murmured, sliding a faded photograph across the desk. It depicted a group of workers standing before an enormous clock, the centerpiece of a once thriving factory that had occupied the lot decades ago. "They say the clock was built by a man named Edgar Mallory, obsessed with the idea that every moment was a piece of someone's soul. When the factory closed abruptly, that clock vanished. But sometimes, in the dead hours, it seems as if its spirit lingers in the walls." Haunted by the photograph and Mr. Corbett's cryptic words, Alexis dove into research at the local library. She pored over old newspapers, finding scattered references to Edgar Mallory, a brilliant horologist whose genius bordered on madness. His final invention, dubbed simply the Eternal Timepiece, was rumored to capture and hold moments in time, leaving those who encountered it feeling as if they'd lost pieces of themselves. No record of the machine's whereabouts survived, but local legends hinted that its remnants might still be hidden within Neon Ascend. That very night, the tapping resumed. Determined and frightened in equal measure, Alexis armed herself with a flashlight and a notebook. The rhythmic knocks led her down a narrow corridor behind her apartment, where the hum of electricity was replaced by an almost tangible stillness. The corridor's peeling wallpaper and stained carpeting spoke of years of neglect, yet a strange order seemed to persist within the chaos. Alexis's footsteps echoed as she followed the sound to a door tucked away at the corridor's end, a door she had never noticed before. With a trembling hand she pushed it open. Beyond lay a cramped, forgotten storage room, filled with dusty boxes, rusted tools, and the lingering smell of oil and decay. Against one wall, almost concealed by shadows, was a large, archaic clock face, its ornate hands frozen at exactly 3:17. The glass was cracked in places, and the numbers were worn, yet the design was unmistakably elaborate, a relic from a bygone era. As Alexis stepped closer, the tapping returned, not from the machinery but seemingly from within the very clock itself. "Hello?" she called softly, voice echoing off the cold, concrete walls. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in a voice that sounded as if it were spoken from the depths of time, came the reply. "Time is not free." Her pulse thundered in her ears. The voice was neither warm nor welcoming. It carried an unspoken sorrow, a lament for moments lost and lives unfulfilled. The air around the clock seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly energy, and Alexis could almost feel invisible hands brushing against her skin. The door behind her closed with a soft click, sealing her in the room with this haunting presence. Desperate to escape, she reached for her phone, but it slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the hard floor and shutting off. Panic rose in her chest as she fumbled in the dark for the door. When she finally burst out into the corridor, the sound of the tapping ceased abruptly, leaving only the pounding of her own heart as her companion in the silence. In the days that followed, Alexis's life became a delicate balance of dread and determination. By day, she went to work at a nearby design firm, where she found solace in creative projects and lively banter with colleagues. Yet, every night, the building's mysteries called to her. The once bright corridors of neon ascend began to feel like conduits to another realm, one where past and present converged in silent, enigmatic whispers. Late one evening, as she sat at her small desk in the apartment, Alexis decided to reach out to a local historian known for his research into the city's industrial past. Over a cup of bitter coffee in a cramped diner lit by neon signs, Professor Rourke shared what he knew about Edgar Mallory and his cursed timepiece. "Mallory was a visionary and a madman in equal measure," he said gravely. "He believed that every second was a treasure, and that by capturing time, one could steal away a part of life itself. When the factory burned down, it wasn't just machinery that was lost, but a piece of his tortured soul." Armed with this new knowledge, Alexis began to explore the building's hidden spaces with renewed purpose. One night, guided by an inexplicable force, she returned to the storage room where the clock was mounted. This time, she brought along tools, a flashlight, a camera, and even a notebook to document every detail. As she examined the clock face, she discovered that behind the ornate numbers, there were intricate engravings that looked like they were not meant for mortal eyes. They depicted bizarre symbols intertwined with images of human figures, all seemingly frozen in a moment of eternal agony. The more Alexis studied the engravings, the more she felt a sense of overwhelming sorrow, as if the symbols were a record of countless lives lost in the relentless march of time. In the weeks that followed, Alexis's nightly vigils grew longer and more perilous. She began to experience strange dreams, vivid, unsettling visions of an endless corridor bathed in a pale, blue light, where time itself seemed to bend and twist. In these dreams, she saw figures drifting silently past, their eyes filled with unspoken terror, as if they were trapped in an eternal loop of regret. Sometimes, she even glimpsed a reflection of herself, but in that mirror world, she appeared gaunt and haunted, her eyes hollow and filled with despair. One fateful night, as the storm outside intensified, Alexis found herself unable to sleep. The sound of the rain mingled with the steady drip of water from a leaky pipe, creating a dissonant symphony that only deepened her unease. At precisely 3:17 a.m., the tapping began once more. This time, however, it was accompanied by a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from every corner of the apartment. Gathering her courage, she followed the sound to her living room, where the air felt charged with a palpable electricity. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling yet determined. In response, the tapping quickened, and from the silence emerged a series of fragmented words, a whisper so soft it was almost drowned out by the storm. "Release us free!" The voice was layered with the voices of many, each one desperate and mournful. Alexis's mind raced as she tried to comprehend the meaning behind the cacophony. Were these the lost seconds, the stolen moments of those who had suffered at the hands of time? Or were they something far more sinister, a chorus of souls trapped by an insatiable hunger for more life? Over the next several nights, the phenomena grew bolder. Objects in her apartment began to shift subtly when she wasn't looking, a framed photograph slightly askew, a book that seemed to open by itself, curtains that fluttered despite the absence of wind. Alexis started to record these anomalies on video, compiling a growing archive of unexplained events. In quiet moments of introspection, she wondered if the building itself was a living entity, a relic that had absorbed the grief, the rage, and the sorrow of its past occupants. Perhaps Neon Ascend was a silent witness to histories too dark to remember, a repository of broken moments and lost dreams. One evening, as Alexis reviewed her footage, she noticed something extraordinary. In one of the recordings, taken during a particularly long and restless night, she observed a figure standing by her window, a translucent silhouette that gazed out over the city with an expression of deep longing. The figure wore an old-fashioned work coat, reminiscent of images she'd seen of Edgar Mallory in the faded photograph from Mr. Corbett's office. As the camera zoomed in, the figure seemed to reach toward the glass, as if trying to bridge the gap between the world of the living and that of the forgotten. Driven by a mix of terror and empathy, Alexis began to communicate with the spectral presence. She set up a small audio recorder in her living room, speaking softly into the silence. "I want to help you," she said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you're hurting. I understand what you've lost." For a few agonizing minutes, there was nothing but the hum of the city below, until, almost imperceptibly, the recorder captured a reply, a single, sorrowful word. "Remember." That word became a mantra for Alexis. She spent days scouring the city's archives, piecing together fragments of Edgar Mallory's tragic story. In old letters and faded diaries housed in a dusty corner of the public library, she learned that Mallory had been a man driven by loss. His wife, a gentle soul with eyes like warm amber, had died suddenly, leaving him with an unquenchable void. In his grief, he had poured all his anguish and obsessive brilliance into building the eternal timepiece. A machine meant to capture not just the passing of seconds, but the very essence of life. Yet, in doing so, he had inadvertently trapped his own soul, along with those of others who had encountered his creation. One stormy night, as the city was awash in torrents of rain and the air crackled with electricity, Alexis returned to the hidden storage room. With renewed determination, she carefully examined every detail of the clock's face, the engravings, and the surrounding relics. She meticulously documented each symbol and compared them with sketches from Mallory's diaries. As she deciphered their meaning, she felt an overwhelming connection to the sorrow that had haunted the horologist for decades. It was as if the building itself was urging her to complete the work he had begun so long ago. In a final act of resolve, Alexis reached out to a local restoration expert, a quiet, reserved man named Daniel who had spent his life preserving relics of the past. Together, they began the delicate process of disassembling parts of the ancient mechanism embedded in the wall. Under Daniel's steady hands and Alexis's watchful eyes, the gears and cogs, though rusted and worn, were slowly coaxed back into a semblance of life. Their work was punctuated by moments of eerie stillness, as if the building was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to emerge from the depths of time. As midnight approached on the night of their most critical repair, the tension in the hidden chamber became nearly unbearable. The rhythmic tapping had subsided into an expectant hush. With a final, careful adjustment of a stubborn gear, the entire mechanism shuddered to life. The clock face flickered with a ghostly luminescence, and for one excruciating moment, the room was filled with a chorus of overlapping whispers. Alexis and Daniel exchanged glances of equal parts awe and trepidation as the sound of a single, resonant chime echoed through the chamber. 3:17 a.m. had arrived once again. In that moment, as the luminous glow of the restored clock bathed the room in an otherworldly light, a spectral figure appeared before them. It was Edgar Mallory, his face etched with profound sadness and relief, his eyes reflecting centuries of longing. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice a fragile blend of gratitude and regret. "At last I am remembered." His form shimmered, then slowly dissolved into a cascade of light that seemed to merge with the clock's glow, as if his essence was being released into the fabric of time itself. The next morning, Neon Ascend awoke to an uncanny quiet. The once persistent tapping was gone, replaced by a gentle stillness that carried with it the promise of resolution, and the lingering question of whether all moments, once stolen, can truly be returned. Alexis's life, forever altered by the encounter, moved forward with a subtle transformation. She carried within her the weight of a secret that defied the ordinary, a mystery that bridged the gap between grief and redemption. And though the building's corridors remained silent, and its walls bore no further signs of the haunting mechanism, every so often, When the rain fell and the neon lights blurred into the dark, she would pause and listen, wondering if somewhere, hidden deep in the heart of Neon Ascend, time was still whispering its long-forgotten tale. In the weeks and months that followed, Alexis continued to document the unusual occurrences in her apartment. The restoration had not erased the building's enigmatic past, but it had opened a portal, a subtle, ephemeral connection to those moments that had been trapped in the abyss of time. Neighbors, once dismissive of the old legends, began to speak in hushed tones about inexplicable coincidences, and the story of Neon Ascend grew into a local myth. Meanwhile, Alexis found herself drawn to the art of storytelling. Each night, as she settled into bed with the soft murmur of rain outside and the distant hum of the city, she wrote feverishly in her journal, capturing every nuance of the strange peace that had come to replace the building's former disquiet. Yet even as normality crept back into daily life, Alexis could not shake the feeling that the mysteries of Neon Ascend were far from fully resolved. In quiet moments of reflection, she wondered whether the release of Mallory's spirit had truly mended the fabric of time, or if it had merely opened a door to further secrets waiting to be discovered in the endless echo of the neon abyss. And in those lingering moments, when the world was suspended between night and day, she would smile softly at the memory of that final chime, a reminder that some stories, no matter how deeply hidden, never truly end. Shadows of the Neon Abyss is a continuous narrative that weaves together modern urban life with supernatural mystery, rich sensory detail, and haunting internal reflections. It is designed to engage readers on multiple levels, inviting them to lose themselves in the echoes of time and the secrets that reside in forgotten corners of our world. In the heart of a sprawling metropolis that never quite slept, where neon lights battled the encroaching darkness of midnight and rain-slicked streets whispered secrets to those who dared to listen, Mira Delacroix arrived at an old building that seemed to defy time. The structure, a mismatched fusion of modern glass panels and weathered brick, exuded a peculiar melancholy. Even as the city's vibrant energy pulsed around it, the building appeared to harbor its own somber heartbeat, a slow, measured throb echoing through its ancient walls. Mira, a young journalist with an insatiable appetite for mysteries that defied explanation, had been drawn to the building by a series of unexplained events reported by several residents of the nearby district. Rumors had circulated about odd lights flickering in empty hallways, distant voices that seemed to murmur lost regrets, and shadows that moved with a life of their own. Despite the building's outwardly mundane appearance, a modest apartment complex amidst a sea of modern high-rises, there was an undeniable aura of enigma, as if every brick and beam was steeped in forgotten history. That fateful evening, as Mira stepped off the worn steps of the building, the cool air of early autumn wrapped around her like a shroud. A drizzle began to fall, the raindrops tapping against her umbrella in a rhythmic cadence, mirroring the persistent beat of her anxious heart. The entrance hall was dimly lit by a series of flickering bulbs that cast long, wavering shadows across faded murals depicting scenes of a bygone era. Myra's footsteps resonated in the cavernous space, each echo a reminder of her solitary mission, to unearth the hidden narratives woven into the fabric of this place. At the reception desk, behind a layer of dust and neglect, stood Mr. Hollister, the elderly caretaker whose lined face seemed to bear the weight of countless untold stories. His eyes, a piercing shade of blue, held both kindness and a touch of sorrow, as if he had borne witness to the building's secrets for decades. "Welcome, Miss Delacroix," he said in a voice that trembled like the distant sound of wind through old oak trees. "I suppose you've come to see what remains behind these walls." His tone was gentle yet laced with a forewarning, a subtle invitation to step into a world where the past was never quite dead. Mira nodded, her recorder and notebook clutched tightly in her hands. "Yes, Mr. Hollister," she replied softly, her voice barely audible over the patter of rain. "There are stories here that the city has long forgotten, stories that are begging to be told." As she spoke, her eyes swept over the faded photographs that adorned the reception area, sepia-toned images of smiling families, dignified individuals in formal attire, and children playing in lush gardens, all captured at a time when the building was a vibrant hub of life. Now, however, the images seemed to watch her with a disquieting intensity, as though they held the memories of souls long past. That very night, after settling into a sparsely furnished apartment on the third floor, Mira began her investigation. The room, though modest in its layout, was steeped in an eerie charm. Faded wallpaper peeled at the corners, revealing layers of history beneath. A solitary window framed the cityscape, its view obscured by swirling mists and the relentless drizzle. Mira lit a single candle, its warm glow battling the oppressive gloom, and began to sift through old records and personal diaries she had acquired from Mr. Hollister. Each document hinted at a rich tapestry of lives intertwined with tragedy and unfulfilled desires, and as she read, the soft rustle of paper merged with the distant hum of the city outside. Over the following days, the building's strange phenomena began to manifest more vividly. Mira noticed that objects in her apartment appeared to subtly shift positions overnight. A porcelain vase that once rested on a dusty shelf would be found at the foot of her bed, its delicate pattern illuminated by the candlelight as if bathed in an otherworldly radiance. Footsteps echoed in the corridors at odd hours, and sometimes, in the silence of the night, she would swear she heard a soft, plaintive sigh, as if the very walls were lamenting lost love and sorrow. The boundary between her waking hours and restless dreams began to blur, and with each passing moment, the building revealed itself as a living chronicle of memories too potent to fade away. One particularly stormy evening, when thunder growled like an ancient beast and rain battered the windows in a frenzied dance, Mira heard a persistent knocking at her door. The sound, irregular and almost pleading, sent a shiver down her spine. Hesitantly, she opened the door to find a small, leather-bound book resting on the threshold. Its cover bore an intricate engraving, a spiral intertwined with a crescent moon, evoking images of forgotten lore and celestial omens. With trembling hands, she brought the book inside and sat down at her desk, its pages yellowed and filled with elegant, looping script that chronicled the inner musings of a soul burdened by secrets. As she pored over the cryptic entries, Mira discovered that the book belonged to a former resident of the building, a young woman named Isabella, whose life had been marred by inexplicable occurrences and profound loneliness. Isabella's words spoke of unseen forces that stirred in the shadows, of conversations held with entities that defied mortal understanding, and of a pervasive sorrow that seemed to seep from the very pores of the building. One passage, written in a trembling hand, described a veil between worlds, a thin barrier that, when breached, allowed the echoes of past lives to seep into the present. Mira's heart pounded as she read the words, feeling an inexplicable kinship with the woman whose torment transcended time. In the days that followed, Mira found herself engaged in an unspoken dialogue with the unseen. Late at night, when the city fell silent and the building's secrets emerged from the darkness, she would speak aloud into the void. "Who are you?" she asked one evening, her voice barely more than a whisper. For a heartbeat, silence reigned, only to be broken by the faintest murmur, a soft, sorrowful reply that seemed to come from the very walls. "We are the echoes," the voice intoned, a melancholic resonance that stirred both fear and compassion within her. These spectral conversations became a ritual, each exchange laden with hints of unresolved grief and longing. Determined to uncover the full extent of the building's haunted past, Mira began delving deeper into its history. She visited the city archives, where she unearthed a series of forgotten documents that painted a vivid picture of the building's origins. Constructed over a century ago by an enigmatic architect whose designs were said to be inspired by otherworldly visions, the structure was built on land steeped in ancient ritual and mysticism. Rumors had circulated that the architect had made a pact with forces beyond the human realm, infusing the building with a spirit that could neither be controlled nor understood. As Mira absorbed the details, she found herself caught in a labyrinth of intrigue, a narrative where the past and present intertwined, and where every stone held a memory of love, despair, and irrevocable loss. The deeper Mira ventured into the mystery, the more the building seemed to respond. At night, the corridors grew longer, and shadows danced with an almost sentient purpose. One evening, while examining a narrow passage behind a row of dusty bookshelves, she stumbled upon a door that she had never noticed before. It was unassuming, almost ordinary, but when she turned the brass handle, A sudden gust of cold air swept past her, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and forgotten memories. Beyond the door lay a small, hidden chamber, its walls lined with archaic symbols and adorned with relics of a time long past. In the center of the room sat a solitary mirror, its surface dark and reflective, as if it held the secrets of every soul that had ever gazed into it. In that moment, Myra's own reflection wavered and transformed, revealing not just her own image, but the faint visage of another, a woman with eyes filled with sorrow and a smile that hinted at both beauty and tragedy. "Who are you?" Myra murmured, her voice echoing off the stone walls. The reflection remained silent, its eyes conveying a silent plea for remembrance. For a long while, Myra stood transfixed by the mirror, as though it had become a portal to a realm where time was but a distant memory, and where the living and the dead coexisted in a bittersweet embrace. As the nights grew darker and the spectral phenomena more pronounced, Myra's investigation took on an almost obsessive quality. She recorded every whisper, every shift of shadow, every inexplicable sound. Her once objective journalistic inquiry evolved into a personal quest, a desperate need to understand the echoes of the past and to find solace in the stories of those who had suffered in silence. In the quiet solitude of her apartment, she penned long, introspective entries that wove together her observations with the raw, unfiltered emotions that the building stirred within her. "We are but fleeting phantoms," she wrote in one particularly anguished entry. "Trapped in a cycle of longing and loss, our memories etched into the fabric of time." Her words resonated with a profound melancholy, capturing the essence of a place where every moment was saturated with the weight of history. One particularly fateful night, as the wind howled like a forlorn spectre outside and the building shuddered under the force of a relentless storm, Myra felt a presence so overwhelming that it seemed to command the very air around her. The building's corridors pulsated with a spectral energy, and the familiar murmurs of unseen voices rose to a fevered pitch. In the midst of the tempest, Myra found herself drawn back to the hidden chamber, the mirror beckoning her with an irresistible pull. Clutching the leather-bound book close to her heart, she stepped through the doorway once more, each step heavy with anticipation and dread. Inside the chamber, the mirror's surface shimmered as if alive. Myra approached it slowly, her breath catching in her throat, and gazed deeply into its depths. The reflection that met her eyes was not merely her own. It was an amalgamation of every sorrowful soul that had ever inhabited the building, a tapestry of grief and unspoken farewells. In that silent communion, Myra heard a voice, soft yet insistent. "Remember us." The words, imbued with centuries of pain and longing, seemed to vibrate through her very being. For a moment, she felt herself merging with the countless echoes that had haunted these walls, as if her own identity were dissolving into a vast sea of collective memory. Over the following hours, the storm outside gradually subsided, leaving behind a heavy, humid stillness. In the quiet aftermath, Myra emerged from the hidden chamber forever changed. The spectral presence, though still palpable, had receded into a gentle murmur. A reminder that while the building's mysteries might never be fully unraveled, they would continue to whisper their truths to those willing to listen. In the days that followed, she dedicated herself to preserving the story of the building and its inhabitants, weaving together her investigative findings with the raw, poignant experiences that had transformed her life. Her articles, published in local newspapers and later compiled into a haunting memoir, captured the hearts and imaginations of readers far and wide. Myra's narrative did not provide neat resolutions or tidy conclusions. Instead, it left readers with lingering questions, a sense of wonder mingled with melancholy. The building remained a silent enigma, a place where time converged and diverged, where love and loss coexisted in a delicate balance. And as the city continued to bustle with life around it, the old building on the forgotten street stood as a monument to the power of memory. A repository for the echoes of those who had loved, suffered, and ultimately transcended the boundaries of mortality. In quiet moments, when the city's clamor gave way to the gentle murmur of midnight, Myra would sometimes return to the building, walking its labyrinthine corridors in a state of reflective solitude. She had come to understand that the true terror lay not in the spectral apparitions or the inexplicable phenomena, but in the profound realization that every soul leaves an indelible mark on the tapestry of time. The building, with its fractured light and sorrowful whispers, had taught her that even in the depths of darkness, there exists a fragile beauty, a poignant reminder that every life, no matter how fleeting, is etched into eternity. And so, in the interplay of shadow and light, of memory and longing, the story of the building and its spectral inhabitants continued to unfold. A continuous, unending narrative that defied the confines of mortal understanding, inviting all who dared to listen into a world where every echo carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories, and every whisper promised that some mysteries, like the fragile bonds of love and loss, were meant to endure forever.